Well,
Cookie.
welcome to episode 2 of the F5 Recovery Podcast. F5 Recovery Radio. Man, this is so awesome that we're
I
here.
think we're probably gonna have to drop
The F5?
radio. F5. Wow.
Just kidding.
Well, or whatever.
I was thinking if we did go with a new name for this podcast, we could call it the Pivot Podcast.
Pivot Podcast?
Yeah.
Cool.
It was kind of ringing when you said pivot, because that's like the epitome of like why everything
Works. Why it gels.
It existed. It was that
A pivot.
choosing to go that other direction.
Yeah.
You want to elaborate on that a little bit more so that people understand it? Like, we get the whole pivot thing, but you use it a lot.
Yeah,
with
I
recovery.
spell it with 2 V's.
Do you? Yes.
Boom, boom. Yeah.
So welcome to the Pivot Podcast. Speaking of
No,
pivots.
I don't. I think it's we're already into season 2.
Yeah.
It'd be like, and we already changed the name once. Remember, it used to be Eat, Sleep, Hustle, Repeat.
And then it was Red Tape Reform.
Red Tape Reform,
And
and
now
then
it's
F5
Recovery
Radio, and now it'll probably just be F5 Recovery Podcast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love naming things.
Yeah.
I love coming
I
up
know.
with
You
witty
remember
names.
when we were trying to come up with names for ourselves, and she showed
First
up with like a
episode.
notepad,
Yeah.
with all these different. I was like, oh, we do stuff at home. Okay.
Oh, it was funny
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
It
It
was
was
really
great.
good.
That was like our
Totally
first
got shut
episode.
down, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I still have that list.
You have to bring it for the next episode.
I will. I will.
I'm gonna be like honest, sort of like all the names she had for me was like smuggler or something, like just weird, like
Plum smuggler. Yeah. Dangerous. There were some really good ones in there that were pretty
Dangerous?
kind of
Dangerous?
badass. Yeah.
Oh. were they?
just dangerous. Like
Yeah.
that was the name you.
Yeah,
Just
I had
dangerous.
that was in there.
Okay.
Yeah. So one.
Oh, so you
Ricky,
didn't read the
K-Town,
list.
and
Huh.
typical man, huh?
Glad I put time into that.
You know, you actually like I would if you probably are that guy where you're like typical man. Like, you have 65 pairs of shoes. So it's
Well, yeah. I know.
you're definitely not a
I'm
typical
impressed.
man.
I'm
Not at
impressed.
all.
Yeah. I'm impressed.
So what's the topic today? There, Pretty Ricky.
Yeah.
One pretty Ricky.
Ooh, thank you.
You're
One
welcome.
Pretty Ricky.
Because there's a group named Pretty Ricky, so I had to distinguish myself, so I didn't get sued.
So your name now is One Pretty Ricky,
That's why it's
like
a
the
one on
number one.
It always has been, right? Yeah.
But people just forget it, so
What's
it's
the
fine.
group Pretty Ricky? Is that like
They're
a
an
boy
R&B.
band or something?
R&B. Had a great song called On
Are
the
all
Hotline.
their names Ricky?
No, they all
Okay.
have different names. But basically, like the name came from a show called Martin, like way back in the '90s, and his like.
I'm
arch-
familiar with Martin.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember
Martin.
the episode? His arch nemesis. His name was Ricky Fontaine. Pretty Ricky, what they call him, and it's the like first documented selfie on TV.
Oh.
He had this like camera that he like took a picture of
Like a
himself
35 millimeter, crank it. And then,
with. It just took
Yeah.
a picture of himself. Yeah, so but like my cousins like ran with that when I was growing up. Like that was like all of
so
it.
that's where Pretty Ricky came from.
Because you took a selfie?
No, because
Oh.
Because his cousins called
yeah,
him
my
that.
cousins call me Pretty Ricky forever. They still do.
Are they your cousins though? Are they
Some of
your
them are.
nephews
5
and
of 'em.
nieces?
Some of them like.
I
are
still don't
cousins.
get why they call you Pretty Ricky. Just because of that guy? Do you look like him?
No, but I mean, I always like.
But
just
his
dressed
name was
up and-
Ricky, and then in the
Yeah, they
90s,
just,
there's
like,
only so many
associate.
TV shows, you know.
Yeah, your name's Ricky.
Yeah.
so we just made the association. And they're like, oh, here you
Oh
go.
man, you know, some days I just don't put things together.
It's fine.
Yeah,
We'll put them together for you.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, today's topic, speaking of putting things together, I always love doing that transition. Today's topic is when to quit. So I wanted to kind of like discuss and help. What we've always done on season 1 of this episode is really try to help people in a variety of aspects of recovery. But today I wanted to like really kind of help the people who aren't themselves in recovery, but maybe have a loved one who's still in active addiction and are really struggling and trying to help that person find recovery. So at what point, does the love stop? At what point do you stop supporting, or what point do you?
Oh, we're gonna go that route, like family route or loved one. Okay.
Yeah.
Not when to quit doing meth.
No, that should
Usually
be
if
hopefully
you're
a given.
questioning it, or if you're, doing meth,
If you're
that's
doing
probably
meth.
when. Yeah.
Yeah. When should I quit meth? Now.
Yeah.
Now's a great time. Yeah.
Great time.
But the people who are supporting someone who hasn't decided to quit meth, how do you help them be able to know when?
I suppose it'd be like a double woozy if they do meth too, and they're like, oh, I want him to quit meth.
He's using all my
I'm
meth.
gonna quit you, so you quit using meth, but I'm gonna continue.
Stop using my
I'm
meth.
gonna continue to use meth.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop using meth. So you stop.
Apparently,
using
that's my meth voice. Meth.
meth, like meth mouth.
Meth mouth.
I have that.
Oh.
Thanks for making fun of me right to my face.
Keep the bar low.
Quit looking at my teeth. My eyes are up here.
Oh.
You know, like family is it's like it's a weird or whatever, because it's like it's hard to like know when you're doing the right thing because you just want to do the loving thing, you know, most of the time. Like you think that, you know, that if you continue to like just help them, right? Like they're just, you know, they're gonna get better if you keep helping. And I'm not like, it's a journey. So like if people choose to help until, you know, for years and years, and people choose to just cut it off right away, like like it's all the same battle. You know, so it's, and some people, just like with addiction, like there's people who quit using meth and you know, quit drinking, you know, as soon as they start going to recovery meetings, and then they just stay that way or whatever. And some people relapse for 10 years. Like it's the same, you know, like one's just not using drugs.
Right.
Their drug is the person,
Right.
you know, like they're addicted to, and the problem that I see that happens with it is it's kind of like, have you ever worked in sales?
Mm-hmm.
So like when you work in sales and you're like a sales manager, most sales managers aren't doing sales.
Right.
Like they're managing the salespeople. And the problem with that is that their goals and their outcomes are based on other people's efforts.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so you'll see sales managers that are just like, you know, just a roller coaster because they're like, you know, technically not in control, but they think they are.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, because you can't control people's behaviors. You can't
Right.
control their thoughts. You can't, in sales, you can't control how many cold calls they're going to make. You know, you can tell them, you can suggest it, you know, you can even like shame them. And like, if you don't make, you know, 100 calls today, like you're not going to have a job or, you know. And so that's the only like analogy that I've seen that's like the closest to it, because the reason is that like family members are usually like emotionally attached to that person.
Yeah.
And so they take it worse. They take, like when the outcomes are not achieved, they take it personally.
Yeah.
And it's the same with like sales managers, because their quotas are built on other people's quotas.
Right.
So if you hit your quotas, you make more money, right?
Right.
And it's completely dependent upon them. So like in that, you know, financial, like emotionally attached to them. That's why most sales managers are kind of dicks, you know, because they don't know how to like comprehend being graceful,
Right.
you know, to help or, you know, teach or whatever. They're just more worried about hitting those boxes.
Right.
And I only know this because I've had sales managers that were trying to like manage me, and I'm not manageable. Like I'm just, you know, there's a reason I started my own businesses, because I just can't, like I'm incapable of like being managed, right? And so like even with my family, like when I was like going through addiction stuff, like the best thing that they could do for me was to just get out of the way, right? And they were just there for me to make sure that I ate when I needed to eat if I reached out, but they never gave me money. They never like if I went to jail, like I was in jail. They weren't bailing me out, you know, like they let me feel the pain of my decisions. And like with sales managers, it probably like the best thing that a sales manager could have done for me is fired me and let me go work for, you know, someone else or whatever. Like, you know, and I guess real quick, and, you know, you guys, you know, give your opinions. Like when I sponsor guys or I mentor guys that I'm not related to, it's really easy for me to stay objective, right? So like when family members are like, what do I do? I'm like, just send them my way, or send them this way, or send them that way. Let someone else work with them, because there's no guilt, there's no shame, there's no trauma, right? Yeah. And a lot of times when you have a loved one who's trying to like be that person, it's kind of like, it's kind of like when you go to court and the prosecutor is going to be your attorney.
Right.
Right? Like you've wronged the state, you've harmed the state, whatever, and that person represents the state. And now you're like in a relationship with them.
Right.
They're just like micromanagement or nitpicking or whatever, nagging is, you'll hear like, why, if you just leave me alone, I'd, whatever. And there's some truth to that. So like send them to go be with an attorney, a public defender, whatever. Right. Because I'll like tell my like guy I mentor, I'd be like, I think this is what you should do in this situation. And then and then he doesn't do it. And then he comes to me and is like, my life is a mess. And I'm like, well, maybe take this suggestion, the one I suggested last week or whatever. And like, and so I can have that and like stay calm. When my son got sober and he came to me and he was like, I think I'm going to do this, do that. I'd be like, no, you do it this way. Right. There's just something that ticks when it comes to like being emotionally connected to them. You just don't see objectively.
Right.
So it's a journey, is what I'm saying. And the best thing you can do is just get out of the way.
Right. Kirsten, what about for you?
Which is really hard. I mean, that's really hard to do, especially when it's your family member. I just think anytime addiction is an illness, it's a family illness, and especially if it's like your kid or a significant other, you're just emotionally involved, like you were saying, and it's hard to not take that stuff personal. But really, it has nothing to do with you. When I was probably 20 years old, I read the 4 Agreements, and it was like, it just changed how I saw everything, and that nothing is about me, and it just made life so much easier. But anytime you're kids, it's super difficult to not be over emotionally invested.
Right.
And then you think like, well, when do you quit? It seems like a goofy question. Like you can't quit. And you're so afraid that they're going to die, or they're making their lives so much harder. And from the outside looking in, it's like, well, all you have to do is stop doing this and do this. It's so easy. Right. But when you're the one with the illness, it's really difficult to do that. But that's why there's Al-Anon, there's programs to help you have someone in your life that's addicted without having your life become them, know? And a lot of times I've watched families where the alcoholic or the addict gets better, and then they don't have anybody to worry about anymore. And so they kind of suck them back into this unhealthy cycle without even realizing it. But I think that
it's weird like that, right? Like it's the family ends up being, even if they're like no drug doing, no alcohol drinking family, they end up being more damaging to that person after they get sober, because they start being really legalistic to the point where it's just like guys like, this band that I like or whatever is playing over at the bar or whatever, and I'm gonna go check it out or whatever, and then the family is like, that's not a good idea. Why would you do that?
Right.
And like they just get, and then you're like, you remember the last time? And it turns into that kind of tone.
Yeah.
And then one or two things are going to happen. They're either just going to like, what's the point? My relationships aren't getting better.
Right.
Whatever. My job sucks. And then they just let that negative voice just like control them. Or they drift apart, and then you have a guy who is 5 years sober and he's living a good life, and he doesn't have anything to do with his mom and dad.
Yeah, which is exactly what you were trying to avoid in the first place. It's just like, don't shoot yourself in the foot. But I think anytime, like you were saying, when my brother called me to get sober, all I knew to say was that, Bray, this is going to be hard. I love you no matter what, whether this works or not. I have no skin in this game. It doesn't matter. I'm going to love you no matter what, and I can't help you. Yep. I have to give you a phone number of someone else, and luckily for us, it worked out wonderfully. And he's been sober a long time now, and but we had a foster daughter live with us, and she was like using and sober and just kind of going back and forth. And my husband and I just sat down and we're like, how do we handle this? Like, because giving her money is just not going to help. You know, all of the things that they ask for, because they're like, oh, I'm desperate. I need, you know, I won't be able to do this and this and this. And it's so hard to watch them struggle, but it has to be their journey, you know? Right. And so we just said, listen, you can be here anytime. You can always be here. This is a safe place. I would prefer that you're sober, but you know, I don't care really. I just don't want you to endanger the other kids in the house by bringing stuff here or whatever. And I think because we were so upfront about it, it was very, she's always been super respectful. She's great, but it was just like, we want to love you, yes, but I just can't enable the unhealthy stuff. And so we really we didn't take anything that she did personal. It was, if she decided not to be sober, that wasn't on us, you know? And, but we also have a program, and we had people to call and be like, what do we do now or whatever. And we were willing to take those suggestions, but you can absolutely love someone completely and never give up on them without exhausting yourself, you know, without giving all of your energy to this unhealthy situation in which you become so unhealthy that you can't see the forest for the trees anymore. And it becomes, like Adam was saying, it becomes like ultimatums. And if I help you with rent, then you have to do this, and all of those things. And anything positive she did, we just supported it. Like, if you want to start going to church or whatever, then we'll go with you. If you want to go to meetings, we'll go with you. If you want to, you know, all of those things. And then the things that were harmful to her life or to any of my kids, it's just like, we're just not going to put our energy into that, you know? But
as long as she didn't do it at home.
Yeah.
Like, whatever life she was living out there, you always had a place to come back to.
Yeah.
But you weren't allowed to bring that in. That was the was the one boundary. Yeah.
Yep.
So
it's respected.
So how did you learn how to? Because you talked about that like up front, like right away. This is what it is. This is what the boundaries are. How did you learn how to have that conversation with her? And you mentioned your brother. How did you learn how to do that?
Well, I'm sure it's just because I'm in recovery and we're around people that are healthy and share that message. Like, I don't have to know anything in life. I just have to know somebody that already has done it, you know? Right. And so I called my husband's sponsor's wife is in Al-Anon, and I got a lot of great information from her, you know, and it helped immensely. And so it just was like, if I'm going to love somebody unconditionally, I can love them unconditionally without giving them $1,000 or whatever, you know what I mean? Right. Without investing myself or taking it personal, and it's hard when it's your kids to not take things personal, because they're your kids, you know. And anyway, but they make their own choices too, and it's got nothing to do with parenting or anything. They just have their own journey, you know. And I just have to respect people's journey, even if it is to fail, you know. I have to respect that that's theirs. And it's just like sponsoring people, or, you know, being someone's mentor. When they're ready, what do they say? When the student is ready, the teacher will appear, or whatever. And that's very true. Like, I will be there for someone all the time, but it doesn't, I don't have to go chasing them down and saying.
And for context, though, she's not related to her.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's a little bit easier for her to, even if she was like friends, you know, or you know, or you like love her, you know, there's still like the line there that she's not related, right? She's not her daughter,
right?
You know, and so like if it was one of her kids, it would feel like there's just something instinctual. It's just different,
right?
You know, so like they were the right people to help this woman, right? You know, would it be different if it was one of her boys? I mean, luckily you haven't had to find that
Right.
out.
Yeah.
You know, I know that with my son, when he got sober, I let him move in, and the rules were, you know, I had the boundaries set in place, and I was just like, I don't care what you go and what you do. No drugs in the house, no drinking in the house, no, you know, no people in the house. Like, this is our safe place. I got other kids, and I did have to kick him out. Because it was not good. You know, like, people were walking on eggshells, and I'm just not going to live that way, right? But it took me 9 months to get there. You know, had it been a person I wasn't related to, they would have been out the minute it started happening.
Right.
That's the objective. You know, that's the if they were bringing drugs in the house and stuff like that.
Sure.
But with my son, like, I just co-signed it essentially. I'd shame him. We don't do that. You know, don't you love your family? You know, like, take it personally. Especially being a guy that was like had long-term sobriety.
Right.
And then he's my son. And then I started thinking about, oh my God, what is the public going to think? And, you know, like, and you know what they thought? Nobody thought anything.
Right.
Yeah.
But nobody knew about it, you know. But they could have.
Right.
Like, that was like my whole, you know, and that's all because I'm emotionally attached to them. Now I got, like, you know, with F5, like 7 transitional houses filled with guys like that. And I don't take it personal when someone relapses, or if they go back to prison or whatever. Like, those are the people that you can help. Like, when it comes to your family, like, you pass them off to the recovery circle. And the most damaging part I've seen with that is that, like, people in recovery are like kind of a unique group of people with a unique sense of humor. I mean, watch this podcast long enough and you'll see that, like, that's really not that funny, you know.
Right.
That's devastating.
And, you know, them, like, parents not encouraging them to continue to hang out with them because they get some red flags, you know, because they're like, well, what happens when they start using, you know, like, just stay out of the way. Like, it's going to be really hard.
Yeah, for real.
Especially for moms. Dads are pretty, you know, like, they kind of struggle in silence from what I've seen. They'll do, like, special one-offs, like go buy them a car or something like that, or, you know, like, but for the most part, they can stay pretty silent and stay out of the way. They understand, like, you know, especially with boys, like, a guy's got to feel like a guy, right? He's got to have some, you know, but moms, man, they'll throw their talons right into you, like, not knowing that they're doing it, because they just think if they love you, maybe you just don't feel like you're loved enough. You know?
I remind you one more time.
If I remind you,
Yeah.
they just need to know everything that we do for them. You know, like, that's what it turns into. And then it's just like kind of this resume of all the stuff that the family does for you, and, like, you continue to use. You must, like, what's wrong with you? That's really what they're saying. Is like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And
We taught you better. It's an illness. It's just like, it's not. They didn't pick that. They don't want to disappoint you don't want to disappoint your family.
Yeah, that's why you can't ever have those real, like, conversations that need to be had, like the trauma stuff, and because they have skin in the game. You know, so what about you?
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you mentioned about my mom and my dad, because even now, however many years later, like, my mom still asks and still checks in, still going to meetings, still doing all the things. And so, like, at first, no, it still kind of makes me upset sometimes, because, like, yeah, I still am, but, like, I don't feel like she's asking those questions because she's, like, really wants me to keep going. More just to satisfy, like, okay, Rick, you're still taking your recovery seriously, like, because then she'll remind, like, you know, because you put us through a lot, you spent a lot, we had to do a lot.
She doesn't really know what to talk to you about.
Yeah, which, I mean, she could tell me about the family, like, it always will start off like, this is what your uncle's doing, this is what your sister's doing, this is all these things. How's your finances? And then all of a sudden, that's what's like, okay, here we go. So, like, it's like immediately the conversation shifts, my attitude shifts, like, everything just shifts, and it's like, just got to get through this. And then I'll figure out a way to, like, pivot the conversation and be like, all right, Mom, like, you know, did I tell you about Ricky or something else to distract her? It's like, oh, what's this shiny
Here's a
thing over
baby.
here? Yeah. And then she'll, like,
baby.
stop talking about that, because it's like, and not that I know that she cares, but, like, sometimes I just can't, like, Mom, I can't do that with you. Like, you're trying, and you're still trying to help me, and I appreciate all the effort and sacrifice. They did so much to help get me to this place. But I can't continue to have that because it's just not the same.
Yeah.
Because
and it's more than her just wanting to be invested in your life.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I know he likes shoes. I'll ask him about shoes, even though I don't really dig shoes. You know what I mean?
And I'd rather her do that than like be invested in my recovery that she really doesn't understand. Or like, or I'll send her things, or like I would get things from like treatment, like, oh my, I really learned this. Or I remember one time, so we were talking about like, in treatment, we were talking about like familial relationships and like, maybe like, do you have any trauma? Do you have any addiction in your family? A lot of these things. So I was like, oh man, this would be really, really great to connect with my mom, because my dad's not really that close with his family. So I was like, Mom, I can talk to my mom about like, hey, did grandma, grandpa, did your brothers or sisters? And like, it was the worst conversation we have ever had. Like bringing up, like asking about addiction, about asking about other things. Like it was like, I was like, whoa, I didn't even know I hit a nerve.
Yeah.
I was just happy that I was like, oh, maybe like I'm not the outcast. I'm not like, maybe this came from somewhere. I'm just trying to like find connection at this point. And she like, it was just like, we don't do, and it was just this whole thing. And I was like, whoa, okay, I'm sorry I brought it up. And it was just like this such a like hard thing, which I was like, well, maybe there is something going on. But I was like, I dare not like ask ever again. Yeah. I'm not going to ask about, my aunts and some other things that I know there was something that happened, but we don't talk about it. Like it's just, it's not addressed. And so it was just, sometimes it's scary. So then it's like, okay, well, if I can't talk to you about, so my parents don't have recovery stories, or if you will, or at least they never told us about. But if I can't talk to you about others, like, because if I went directly to the aunts and uncles that I think maybe, she would find out, I would get scolded, like, why are you talking to Uncle Michael about his past? Like, you shouldn't, talk about it. Like, well, if Uncle Michael wants to talk about it, let him tell me. Yeah. Like, don't control his story to, like, help. Like, especially if it's going to help me. If he could set the boundary, be like, no, Rick, I'm not comfortable talking to you about that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But she would, like, take this on and be like, no, there's no way. Like, you cannot do that because they are going through their things. They are doing this thing. But I was like, well, but yet, if it was my story, you're telling the people at the church and you're doing all this other stuff.
She's proud of you.
Which, but at the same time, it's like, well, why can't you just be proud of him for navigating that? Like, if me asking him questions about his past isn't going to trigger him, make him go out and drink again. Yeah. Isn't going to make him go out and, like, use or do all these other things.
Damn you, pretty Ricky.
Yeah.
Like, is that her fear, though?
I think so. Okay. Sometimes I think, like, somehow, like, just even talking about, like, it's safe to talk about with her, but not safe to talk about with the person who has the issue.
Because you guys could, like, conspire and then be out somehow off and running again.
Yep. Yeah. That's just all indoctrinated, like, beliefs or whatever. Yeah. That's old school stuff,
It's like, but that's not what's going to happen. Yeah. This is a part of it. This is part of, like, this is why I do this podcast. Yeah. This is a
but
part of, like,
there's such little known about addiction. I mean, really, it's just like, even now, if I go out and somebody will say, hey, do you guys want some wine or whatever? And, we'll say, no, we don't drink. And then either they tell me about the reason why they're drinking. And I'm like, I don't care at all. Just drink and I don't even care if you get shitty on this wine and be annoying, whatever, just do it. Or there's talk about somebody they know that also drinks too much. Or, they're like, are you okay with me?
Why don't you drink?
Yeah, why? Are you okay with me drinking?
I saw that the other day where it was like, alcoholism is the only disease that you have to explain why you have it.
Right.
Yeah, why? Well, where should I start?
Or alcohol is the only drug that you have to explain why you don't use it.
Right.
Like, sometimes it would probably just be easier to be like a meth, like, be like, hey, you want to do some meth? Like, like you don't have to worry about that. Like, there's not meth signs. I mean, unless you're in South Dakota where they're like, meth, we're on it.
Yeah,
it's just
bad ad, really bad ad
I've ever seen.
Yep.
Like, oh, okay, but alcohol, like, it's still, I mean, and even when they like now there's like the new mocktails thing that's kind of happening. It's kind of like, they're making non-alcoholic drinks, available or whatever. And man, I'm just like so apprehensive about that because it's like, you know,
why?
Like, where do you get them at the bar?
Right.
Like, we want to make non-alcoholic drinks available. And there's like people who are in recovery that are just like, this is amazing. Now I can have like a normal life. I'm like, that's okay.
Yeah, that's a different
I guess
way of looking at it.
was like the and so they'll go there and they'll like have mocktails or whatever, or they have non-alcoholic beer or whatever. To each their own. Like I think it's cool that you can do that. The first thing in my head is like, why don't you just have a real drink, man? Like, have some Jameson. You know, I just can't do. I'm just not all. I'm not on the bandwagon for mocktails. Have coffee.
Yeah. Drink a soda. It's fine. Yeah.
But I think initially when people get into recovery, they don't know what to do with themselves, or they are like, well, I guess I'll get a pop, which doesn't look very, you know what I mean?
The international drink of sober alcoholics at bars is ginger ale. Like, I have a ginger, like
Shirley Temple. Can you put anything in a glass that looks like I'm drinking alcohol, please?
Yeah. Diet Coke, but give me just one straw so they won't know.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Put it in that regular glass so it looks like I'm one of them.
Because why? Like, everybody already knows that you're drunk, so you're not, you know, the fact that you probably still have your clothes on at 9 o'clock at night is probably, you know, proves that you're sober.
9, like 7, but.
Ooh, sun's down. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
Summer, the sun
Well, I
goes
think
down later.
part of it too is that like the industries are just adapting to like what's becoming the norm, and a lot of it is that people that I'm finding that are getting into recovery don't have recovery friends.
Yeah.
Like they're just like doing, you know, Zoom meetings or whatever, which is all cool. Saved my ass during COVID. You know, but like it's became the norm that you don't have to like go to meetings, you don't have to whatever. Because I mean, like I said, don't get me wrong, everyone's on different journeys. I believe in many platforms, you know, all the different 12-step groups, all the church groups, stuff like that.
Sure.
But like the industry will like respond in a way to accommodate. And like when you're in a lonely place, like you're like the only one at the bar drinking a mocktail, right? Or you're the only one in all the situations or whatever. It's only a matter of time before, you know, your mind starts like playing tricks on you, right? Like, oh, I've been coming to the bar for a couple of years now. Probably not that big a deal. I could probably have like a real drink,
Right.
You know, I can just have one.
Yeah.
You know, I've been sober long enough.
Right.
You know, so like when I see people like who are in recovery that are like sponsoring, you know, like this new mocktail or something like that, I'm like, that's cool. Like, let's just remember there's a spectrum.
Yep.
Right? Like, let's remember that there's people who got sober their first try. There's people that it took 20 years to get sober. Like, there's a whole spectrum to it. There's people out there who did a bunch of drugs and like drinking just doesn't do anything for them, so they can have a drink.
Yeah.
Right? Like, not all addicts are alcoholics, but I really do believe all alcoholics are drug addicts. Right? Like, it's just, you can't, it's, like, this is like the only hardline opinion I have. Like, there is no such thing as social meth users or social heroin users, right? Like, it's just, I don't care what anybody says. I will never fall to believe that you can do heavy ass narcotics and not be a drug addict, right? Like, it's just, you know, but you can, I've even seen people who identified as an alcoholic, you know, in their early years, and then they went out and had a couple beers and then they just weren't alcoholic. Like, there's so much different, like, spectrum, right? Just like with autism, right? Alcoholism has that too. And so I'm very leery of, like, one, you know, I'll see people say, oh, don't use your, you know, you're preaching your recovery platform. You know what I mean? And then on the other hand, they'll be like, oh, look at this mocktail. Like, you could totally have these. Don't worry about it. Like, it's for the betterment of the recovery community and stuff. And it's like, well, you're just doing the same thing that you're telling me that I'm doing.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, and I've seen people who have gone out and drank NA beer or mocktails, and I've seen more people go back to drinking during that. So just like, if that's your thing, do your thing. But you don't have to like, you don't have to make it like public and like tell people like this is like recovery. Just like I'm not going to go and say that this 12-step group is the only way to recovery.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And why? It's just because you're still uncomfortable. You're still uncomfortable in your own skin that you need a mocktail or, you know what I mean? Really, because there's no other reason to need that. And I think that connection piece is integral to staying in long-term recovery. It is just, I've watched so many people attempt and and want sobriety, long-term sobriety, but are unwilling to be uncomfortable. And if you're not uncomfortable, you're not getting better. So you have to show up and make connections. You have to, I have to find girlfriends that have the same warped sense of humor, that appreciate dick jokes like I do. You know what I mean? I needed to find those people to make it worth doing. Otherwise, like you said, I get lonely, even though I think I don't need people. I just want to be alone. It just doesn't work like that. That connection saves you every time. Right. And that's maybe something that there's 1,000 different ways to do it, but I truly believe the people I have watched get into recovery and find happiness and long-term healthy recovery connected with other people and were willing to be uncomfortable, to be a part of whatever community, any community that just supports whatever you're doing. And, you don't have to change everything. I'm going to get sober and quit smoking and quit doing all the, don't do all that. Just find your people, and all of that stuff figures itself out later. But
that's the one thing that all those recovery platforms have in common, is they all have a community.
Yeah. Yes.
They may do it differently. They may have different verbiage. They may have different, whatever. But all of them have people that are gathering. Yep. That, I honestly believe is the solution, right? But they're all a group of people in a community that are trying to do the same thing, right? Stay sober, get clean, whatever, right? So I don't necessarily agree to the point that it's just any community, right? If I'm a 5-time felon and I'm gonna just hang out with a bunch
ladies.
of Avon ladies, or or a bunch of prosecutors that meet every once in a while and be a part of their community. There's got to be a common goal, right?
A connection at your core.
A common connection, a common identity with one another. Some people find it through Christianity, but they usually find another guy in there somewhere that went through the same thing.
Also sober, yeah.
So it's traveling this journey with people I identify with. I think that is the community, because I saw that video about the rat park thing or whatever. It was just oh, these rats are doing heroin-laced water. I was like, man, you guys are mean to these rats. You just got them addicted to drugs, and then you put them in and they're like, oh, and then we put them in this rat park where they get to have sex and go on Ferris wheels and stuff like that, and they stop using the heroin. I was like, yeah, but I bet you that was it the same rats that were all addicted at one time that they put in there, or was there a bunch of other rats that they mingled with? I'd like to see the transition of I wonder if there was an identity between the rats or whatever that had used, and if they were the ones that were hanging out versus the whole park. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Because that'd be pretty awesome. You'd get heroin water and a park. I mean, it's the best ever. Oh my gosh, ought to be a rat.
I mean, that's pretty typical, heroin in parks. So it's just
yeah, it is.
I see a lot of people using heroin in parks. So I think that this is all out the window right now.
It's like a nap park. Yeah.
Well, I like that you guys had brought up a really good point, but of course want to thank F5 Project and the Ridge for being a sponsor of this amazing podcast that we get to have. But maybe share some things, you guys both had talked about, just this kind of concept of find your tribe, find your people, kind of get out. So if I'm struggling to support, I don't know, my son, let's say, or whoever, if it's a loved one, I think my default will be to go to some other person who has that same relationship with that loved one. If it was my sister, I would talk to my brother, and we both are trying to support that person. Do you think, is there a way to continue to support that connection? Because you both mentioned you should find someone else to do that. Is there a way that you can have that same relationship with another person and support them? Because otherwise, it just feels like you're ganging up. If my dad started to ask me questions on recovery, I just feel have you been talking to mom? It would be really difficult for me to be but if it's my dad's friend, then I'd be okay, yeah, I'd feel a little more comfortable. Do you feel if you're that person trying to love someone in recovery, would you get your partner to be hey, well, let's go talk to our foster daughter, or did you get someone else outside of the familial group to do that?
personally, I think families should stay out of it.
Okay.
All like
It's
one
messy.
thing to like make conversation with my, how's your recovery going, this and that. But like if I want to like try and be involved or whatever, it's never going to be pure. There's always going to be, because it's even with the best parents, there's still trauma there.
Yep.
Right? Like there might, I think even with my dad, if my dad would have got sober, like we could have had probably a little bit more robust conversations about recovery, but he never would have taken, I don't think I ever would have accepted him being like the guy. You know what I mean? Like
Okay.
I've seen too many bad case scenarios happen because of it, and it usually drives them apart, even if they're both in recovery.
Right.
Because it's just like, it's a generational difference now, right? Like the way they did recovery back 20 years ago is not the same way that it's like being done today. And the lingo is not the same. The the meetings aren't the same. We have Zoom. Like everything's like all it takes is like my dad to be like, "Well, you're not real recovery if you're doing Zoom meetings." You know what I mean? So there's just like it's different. And so I with my son, he doesn't really do anything recovery wise that I do for my daily like maintenance or whatever. He's chosen a different path, and I just have to respect that, and I stay out of it. And then if he asks me questions, I usually let him lead.
Okay. Yep.
I never
that's
lead, because it's honestly it's none of my business.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I really believe in like the libertarian view of life, right? Like it's your life,
Right.
and because it'll just turn into opinions,
Yeah.
and the last thing anybody needs in recovery is somebody's opinion.
Right.
We need lived experience, right? Like if he came to me like, hey, like he usually comes to me about business stuff. He's identified with me that he wants what like I have, not necessarily the business itself, but he wants to be able to be an entrepreneur and be in sales and be in marketing and stuff like that. So that's most of our conversations are wrapped around that, and then family, and then like vision of like where we're going in life and stuff. And he finds security in that. Now, I could disrupt all of that by picking apart his recovery.
Right.
And so family should just stay out of it. Just from my experience, they should just stay out of it altogether and just let them have their life when it comes to recovery, the journey, the relapses, the steps in the programs, church, whatever.
And love them no matter what.
Yeah.
What if they never get it? You know what I mean? You will be so regretful that you had like this all or nothing relationship.
You
Where it was
spent your
like,
entire life just shaming and guilting them and feeling like crap.
It's so awful.
Yeah.
But there's in family, you just have a goofy reaction. Even when you're talking about your mom or parents, you have a visceral reaction with your parents or immediate family that you just wouldn't have with somebody else, where I take it so personal, or it's like, well, I know what you mean behind what you're actually saying. And you just feel judged. Like there's just all this, because I've screwed up so much, and I always said, I'm going to change. And I really believed that at the time. It's just that without that other part, without living a life in recovery, I can't change. And then I disappoint them again. And, all of those things. I think that Al-Anon's amazing. I think, I agree with Adam, like you can love your loved one unconditionally and absolutely allow them their own path. And even with like my brother, when he got sober, I never asked about his, like, are you calling your sponsor? Are you going to meetings? I just never asked. If he wanted to bring it up and mention it, awesome. But I didn't even ask when he did that. He would just tell me information or want to know something. And I just knew it had to be personal to him. And I really wanted him to know that no matter how this ended, I was going to be his biggest fan, because I still think he's pretty much amazing and he's really funny. But
He is a cool guy.
and I was so glad when he got sober. But it's his personal journey. It's like Adam was saying, it's none of my business. Right. But even to this day, there's relationships like I know that with my mom had a really open and relationship with her mom, and she wants that with us. And it's just, maybe it's this illness that I have or whatever. It's just different than that. And because I don't want her to worry, because I'm doing great. And I know that if I bring up a concern that she might worry, and that the idea of making her day harder is just like agonizing to me. So I don't want that to happen. And but she'd breathe for me if she could, you know what I mean? But it's one of those things where there's just some things you allow people their own journey, and even if that's to fall flat on your face, that's their journey, and to just be there anyway. But I am a firm believer in Al-Anon. I'm a firm believer in and those ladies and guys. They're badass. I mean, that's like, they are the ones that kept it all together. And then we get sober and we're like, I went to work for 5 days in a row. And we're like, oh God, that's so great. And they're sitting here like, I just supported you for the last 20 years, you idiot,
Like no cred.
I know, nothing. But we're like, 5 days of work. Oh my God.
I did that at work one time. I was working over at High Point, and Justin's sales guy, or he was the VP. And my cubicle just happened to be like right next to his office. So I was just like constantly that annoying sales guy be like, hey, look at me. This is what I did. I made 5 phone calls today. Like, I look back at him like, God, I don't know how they put up with my crap all the time. And so anyways, I got my license back, right? I'm like 31, right? It's actually the first time I really ever probably legally was going to drive, right? And so I went into his office like, Justin, never guess what, dude? I got my license back, man. And he was like typing at the computer, and like I hear it stop. He like leans over. He's like, I've had mine since I was 15. And I was like, well, this didn't go the way I thought it was. I thought he was going to like applaud me and be like, good job, Adam. You're like really in recovery,
You take
and then
the
I
day
go
off
to
and
like my
drive.
recovery group,
And they're just like elated. It's like, oh
Yeah.
my God, biggest news.
go to my recovery group, and I'm like, got my license back today, guys. And it was like a standing ovation,
Right.
because they all know.
Yeah, they get it.
Like, it's a big deal. Like, I was talking to a guy at relapse prevention last night, and he was telling me the 15 things he needs to do to get his license back.
Yeah.
Like, all the barriers in front of him just to drive.
And you understood all 15.
And I knew exactly what he was talking about. And we like navigated through them, and we set a plan and stuff. Like, I feel like I would overwhelm someone who, like, if I would have went to Justin and be like, these are like the 15 things I need to do to get my license back. And he'd be like, so you're not going to be an outside sales guy?
Right. Right. Just like, oh.
Which I was. They hired me without a license as an outside sales guy. Like, they took
optimistic.
Super optimistic. Yeah. I think they had like a pool, like a pool, like how long is Adam going to last or something. They didn't, but I was really grateful for that, because they didn't. There's no reason I should have got that job. I didn't have a license. I didn't have a car. Outside sales. Like, how are you going to go knock on doors?
Right.
Well, I got a phone and I got Zoom, so it was like,
And made it happen.
yeah, we just hustled.
Yeah.
Getting jobs are never a problem. It's the keeping the job gets iffy.
Well, I want to like definitely shout out my sister. So I think as you guys were talking about just like finding that lane, like I really appreciate that. Like when it was a tough conversation to like tell her that I'm like, hey, your brother's addicted, because like we're just super tough. Like that's my best friend.
Yeah.
But like I appreciate it even now, like in all of her things. Like I think she just is so balanced always, or she's always just been really balanced. I've always been the troublemaker, and she'd watch me like, okay, I'm not going to do that. Like she just like use me as the battering ram to like get in the door, and then she would just like kind of just stroll on in, right? And so like I appreciate that like she never like really like talks to me kind of about my recovery. She's like, you just seem off. Yeah. And I know what she's talking about, but she never like directly says like, have you been to a meeting, or you talking response? She's like, you just seem off today, you okay?
Yeah.
And I know what she means. I was like, you're right. And then I would just tell her, like, I was like, yeah, I've been struggling, or I haven't been going to meetings, or whatever it is. Yeah. But I appreciate like she just helps me in like all the other areas. Because, like, recovery is obviously a big part of my life, but, like, I'm still a husband, I'm still a father, I still am an employee, like, all these other different things. So she helps me in all the other aspects, and she just doesn't touch this one. And I respect her so much more for that. Because, like, I don't really want her to help me with that. I mean, she probably could, but, like, I was just like, no, I just would rather, like, I want to talk to the people who I know identify a little closer with that, but help me figure out like how to do marketing. Like I want you to help me figure out my social media, like help me with these other things that I really want that help for. And she just knows that. Like we've never like, I never said that. I never said, Lisa, don't talk about my recovery. Like that's too sensitive. I don't want to do that with you. Kind of just happened. And so like, I think for those who are supporting and trying to love a loved one and trying to figure it out, just find that thing. Maybe if you keep trying to push the recovery thing and it's not working, maybe find something else that you can be a little bit more
or just ask,
with.
like, do you want me to not ask about this?
Yeah.
And
so
be transparent.
Right. And it would help a lot more to just still keep, because I still want, I mean, you know, if you're loving someone, you still want to keep that relationship.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, but if you keep going down, you know, trying to do, like she just kept doing the recovery, I would, you know, we would very easily, I would have just not talked to her. I mean, because she didn't live here, so it would be very easy to just cut her off. Yeah. But it's like, well, this way we can stay connected. So, you know, if people are out there trying to like, well, I'm just really trying to love my husband or my whoever that relationship is just fun. Maybe if it isn't working, you know, maybe try something different. And so that way you can still stay in her life, because that level of support still kept me in recovery. Because she was helping me all these other areas, I felt good, and I was like, okay. And I wanted to go to meetings because I was happy, because I felt like, you know, I do need to apologize for that. Like she was helping me make amendments without even realizing she was helping me make amendments. And it was like, it was crazy. And then I would go to my meetings and I would talk about like, my sister helped me do this and that. And, you know, it was just really, really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like having, like the reverse of that is like having that friend that has an opinion on everything. Yeah. You know, like, oh, like that's how you do heart surgery? You know, like I wasn't even asking about that, but you apparently have an opinion on it and stayed at Holiday Inn Express last night. You know, like it just, I don't have a lot of people around me that are like, because it's just like, come on, dude. Like I understand like you're trying to be helpful, but like you have no idea what you're talking about.
What are you?
Like, or are you just trying to
be
like,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to be right or you want to be happy? Both.
Yeah. But even in a marriage, like I'm married to a man in recovery, and if we're in a disagreement and he says you should call your sponsor, oh hell no, I hit the roof. Then I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just like, I don't know why. He's right.
Every community has that thing too. Because they'll like, even when I was like, because I went to Teen Challenge or whatever, and I was there for like 14 months, and instead you're not allowed to cuss there, right? So in normal places where you like tell someone to F off or whatever, like if you're having an argument with them, they'd be like, I'm gonna pray for you. Like, I will clock you. How dare you? Because they're not like, it's not like, you know, like when you post on Facebook, like, hey, everybody, like, my mom's going through some stuff. I could really use your prayers, or like, I'll pray for you, or like, you leave a comment, I'll pray for you. Like, do you really? But, you know, but like, I'd be sitting there arguing with this guy about some theology stuff, and he'd be like, oh, I don't believe that tongues exist, or whatever the opinion is, and he'll just be like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna pray for you. Like, I will listen.
Take those prayers and
yeah, good for you. Must be nice. It's like the white guy F you.
You condescending, yeah. Ay. That's awful.
Yeah. Must be nice.
Yeah, must be nice.
That's gonna be our slogan for when we're gonna end the episode. Must be nice.
Must be
Tell
nice.
well. All these cameras.
Yep. All the success. Yep. Oh, you've been clean for 5 years. Must be nice.
Yeah. These goddamn mahogany books.
Smell like
Had
leather.
the same job, never been to jail. What?
Must be nice.
One of them has. I know someone here has. They we just broke the fourth wall again.
At least you call it the fourth wall this time.
I don't get what that is. What's a fourth wall? Sorry.
Hey, so I watched this video the other day where it's like, instead of saying sorry, this woman, like if she's late for a meeting, instead of saying sorry, she's like, thank you for your patience. And like that's her thing now. She's like, I'm gonna make it about them and not me. Like come in there and start the meeting with like saying sorry.
Thank you for your patience.
So she's like, it totally changed everything. I was like, oh, that's cool. And so like, Kirsten says I'm sorry a lot. So like every time she's like, what's a fourth wall? And then we look at her. Thank you for your patience.
Thank Thank you for kindly explaining these things to me.
Yeah. So in like the you know the movie world, or like on stage or whatever, like we're like in this episode, we're like we're essentially like making an
Acting.
episode
Yeah.
Right.
for people, right? So like these like
They're watching
the Tellwell guys here don't exist in that world, right? They're,
Okay.
they're production.
Right.
So when we break the fourth wall and we're like, hey, look at that guy over there, you know, or like when
I
the
see.
best when comics do those when they're participating with the audience,
Right.
that's the fourth wall.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the
you're watching
invisible
me
wall
perform.
of this world.
And then now you're bringing this other world into it, breaking that fourth wall.
Very deep.
Have you ever seen Deadpool?
I have.
Yeah, so like when he talks to the audience, that's
Yeah.
breaking the fourth
Oh,
wall.
okay, all right.
Or like The
Yeah.
Office,
He's very
they
funny.
do that with the interviews, like talking to people, or like
Yeah.
they bring the cameraman in. Like that's fourth
It's something
wall
as simple as like looking
too.
at these
Oh,
four guys.
well, this is gonna.
Now the world's gonna be like, there's four other guys in there. There's actually 8.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again to the F5 Project and the Ridge for allowing us to have this podcast. This has been really good. Episode 2 of the Pivot Podcast, that we're calling it. I don't know.
Pivot.
Yeah, the Pivot, the two
Yeah.
V's.
Boom, boom.
Yeah. You guys have anything you want to close with before we
Cha-ching.
get out of here?
No, I just
Well, this
again
week-
like I'm really super grateful that F5 is in a position to be able to do this. I'm glad that Tellwell is like across the street, so this is like makes it awesome.
Right.
And then the Ridge Treatment Center has moved and is now at 121 North University Fargo. So they're on the second floor there. So they got a whole new spot. The old Ridge building is now the F5 housing hub.
Oh, that's
And
what
then
we're
we
doing
have
now.
our
Okay.
office,
Yeah.
you know, over here. So technically, in this area between Midwest Mental Health and the Ridge and FI, we have 4 offices
Wow.
in the Fargo Moorhead area. So it's
Recovery Corner. That's cool.
Yeah, like that'd be cool if we turned North Fargo into like the recovery hub,
Yeah.
like right in the depths of alcoholism city. You know.
Yeah, North Fargo. That's it.
We
Yeah.
heard the
Yeah.
stats from Pab Sagnus. So,
yeah.
All these drunks in North Dakota.
Yeah. Where places not to go: North Fargo, Mandan, and Dilworth.
Yeah.
Is that it?
For people like us, it's like we can't go anywhere because
Yeah.
I could go to Rose Creek. I'll find the dope man in Rose Creek. I know he's in there.
Going down to Briarwood. Like, where
got-
the dope man at?
Yeah, they got cops watching this episode. They're like, Rose Creek.
Yeah, it's probably closer than that. Yeah.
So appreciate you guys taking the time to watch our episode, and shout out to Tellwell and shout out to F5 and the Ridge Treatment and Reentry Center, Midwest Mental Health. Thank
Absolutely.
you all for supporting this, and
sure.
that's how the cookie crumbles.
Not go with that.
Yeah, no, that's bad. We should just say word or something. That's way better.
Yeah.
Thick
Yeah.
With 2 C's.
Thick
And good night.
pivot. Yeah.
and see.